It is week 2 of the college football season, and it is the biggest week in Arkansas football since at least 2007, since pre-Chad Morris era, guys. This is a big deal. Texas is in town. I mean, when have you seen the atmosphere in Fayetteville like this? Since at least Brett Bielema. And even with Brett Bielema, I don't know if there was this much excitement around a single game. Hutch, can you remember the last game that there was this much hype and excitement around?
I mean, you have to think back. I mean, the last time they had a sellout was 2017. That was a TCU game, but even that game, I didn't feel like there was this much excitement and hype just because of the way that the 2016 season ended. Before that, I mean, maybe whenever Texas A&M came to town, and I believe 2013 or 2012. Johnny Manziel came to town. That was a great atmosphere. Before that, probably 2010, the Alabama game. That's probably the best atmosphere I've ever experienced firsthand. So yeah, I mean, it's been a while since we've had a game this hyped.
Yeah, I remember that Johnny Manziel game when he came to town. I wasn't able to go to the 2010 Alabama game. So I always tell people that the loudest I've ever heard Razorback Stadium was when Dietrich Wise sacked Johnny Manziel and then he got up and did his little dance. That's the loudest I've ever heard it. But everybody always says it's the Ronnie Wingo wheel route. And I've seen videos and watched it and stuff, but I mean, do you think that we could have a new loudest moment in Donald W. Reynolds Razorback history this weekend?
I mean, it's certainly possible because I think we're going to see the attendance record go down. The attendance record right now is that 2010 Alabama game, 76,808. This game's already a sellout, and this is the first sellout since they've expanded the stadium with the north end zone when the capacity reached 76,000. So it sounds like there's going to be 76,000 plus standing room only. They always find a way to jam pack as many people in there as they can. So if there's a big moment, it's going to get loud, and plus it's a night game, so everyone has all day to kind of get build up some liquid courage, and so it's gonna be a great atmosphere. It's what college football is all about. I'm so excited.
Yeah, those capacity numbers on stadiums are never accurate. Like I don't know if you guys have ever paid attention, but Cowboys Stadium I think has capacity at 80,000 or something, and their record capacity or attendance is always like 110,000. So those standing room only tickets go a long way. So we'll see where it ends up being this Saturday. But before we get to Texas, before we recap Rice, and then Andrew Hutchinson later is going to talk with Jason Sukamel of OrangeBloods.com. We got to hit some news. Unfortunate news out of practice on Wednesday. Dorian Gerald suffers a broken leg, and man, that is just you hate it for the guy. It just keeps happening to Dorian Gerald, man. But now Arkansas has to figure out what they're gonna do, Hutch.
Yeah, I mean, to say Dorian Gerald is snake bitten would be an understatement. I mean, last 2 years he's gotten hurt in the first game. A couple of years ago, it was that weird strained artery thing that was just a bizarre injury that kept him out the rest of the year. Last year, it only kept him out of a few games. He's able to return, but he was never truly the Dorian Gerald that we expected. And coming into this year, he was talking about, hey, I'm finally healthy. I'm ready to go. I made a comment to a Texas reporter on Wednesday and said, "Hey, this guy is pretty good, and he made it through the first game healthy, so that's a good sign." And then lo and behold, the next day we find out that he goes down, and they do seem to have some depth along the defensive line this year. It's already being tested. John Ridgeway missed the first game. Now you see Dorian Gerald probably going to be out for the rest of the season. Probably Zach Williams is going to be asked to step into that starting role. He's started some, he's played a lot, so that he has experience. And I'm also wondering how they're going to fill up. Who kind of that wasn't expected to have a big role gets moved up. I mean, is it a Mateo Soli who has starting experience under his belt? He played well in very limited snaps against Rice, so I'm anxious to see how the defensive line rotation shakes out now that Dorian Gerald's out.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to bring Alex Trader in on this. He's a staff writer over at HawgBeat.com. Alex, are there any names? I mean, Hutch just mentioned a couple, but who do you really see filling in that Dorian Gerald role now that we're not going to have him for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think Hutch said it best. I think Zach Williams is likely going to be coming in and hopefully making an impact. He has some experience with Barry Odom already over last year, and it's going to be a test. John Ridgway coming in, him coming back is going to be huge. I'm pretty sure that's what we're talking about next. But coming off of that appendectomy last week, filling that hole in the middle only helps the edge rushers. It helps shore up a little bit of that defensive line. So not having two holes or holes across 2/3 of the line, I think is going to make a big impact in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so you just mentioned that as well. John Ridgway's back at practice. Traylon Burks was at practice last week, not all week, but he's been practicing since Monday, knocking off that rust that he had last week. You could see it on the field. Sam Pittman said you could see it. He said he didn't play to his full potential. And we all know Traylon Burks didn't play to his full potential. So it's good to have those two guys back at practice. You've been hearing that Ridgway is a difference maker, and I think Arkansas is going to need a difference maker on that line this weekend against Texas. So, Hutch, how great is it to have another week with Traylon Burks in practice? He's supposed to be 100% this weekend, and then have John Ridgway back as well.
Yeah, I mean, Traylon Burks is a special guy. I mean, I keep referring to him as a generational talent. We don't see too many of these guys come through Arkansas, especially in-state guys like him. So to get him with a full week of practice under his belt, he had a couple of drops against Rice, very uncharacteristic. 5 catches, 42 yards, not terrible by any means, but definitely subpar by Traylon Burks standards. So getting him back and hopefully knocking off the rust, as you said, should help. John Ridgway is going to be massive. I think it was Hayden Henry this week referred to him as a monster. I mean, the guy's 6'6", 320. He also just looks like a mean dude, which is what you want as a defensive tackle. So that will help. Even though he's a defensive tackle and Dorian Gerald's a defensive end, there's enough flexibility on Arkansas's defensive line where maybe if you need more people on the outside, maybe a Markel Utze now has the freedom to go from the inside to the outside. Because of John Ridgway being back. But I'm also curious to see how much John Ridgway actually plays. I mean, the dude's going to be 2 weeks removed from an appendectomy. I mean, that's a literal surgery. They cut him open and they took that appendix out. So I know they got medicine's incredible these days, but still 2 weeks. I've told some other people that he's definitely tougher than me because I can't imagine being cut open and then 2 weeks later playing major college football like he is, especially in the trenches where it's not going to be the most pleasant experience.
All right, last little bit of news, and we can talk a little bit about this in our next segment where we recap the Rice game. But the targeting penalties. You got to talk about the targeting penalties. They really hurt Arkansas last weekend. Grant Morgan goes out really early, and then, of course, Bumper Pool goes out in the second half. Not going to have him for the first half against Texas. And then you saw it all across college football, especially that Ole Miss-Louisville game. I think all college football fans and reporters and whatever, as much as some people want to say, well, don't lead with the crown of your helmet, at some point you just can't keep calling targeting penalties and ejecting players for the entire game. Can we agree on that?
Absolutely. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, that Louisville Ole Miss game that you referenced with like 4 of them in the first half was that's ridiculous. I think the rule itself is good because safety in college football is important. However, maybe they need to adjust the penalty. Maybe instead of it being a 15-yard penalty and an automatic ejection, maybe it could be a 20-yard penalty and the guy gets to stay in the game. Or maybe they make it like a soccer rule where there's a yellow card and a red card where you do it twice, you're done. Or if it's just egregious or something like that on your first one, you get tossed. It's just so weird. And to have the carryover, Bumper Pool being suspended for the first half of Texas, that sucks. It was even crazier last week against Rice. Hayden Henry had to be suspended for the first half because of his targeting penalty in the second half against Alabama. That carried over for an entire offseason. It's just crazy. I think the rule needs to be adjusted. not just fans and reporters and things like that say that, but I mean, players and Sam Pittman, coaches, have said that as well.
Yeah, it's the worst written rule in all of sports in my eyes. You're out there, these kids are out there just playing football, trying to do their job. And a lot of these targeting penalties you'll see the headhunting ones every now and then, but the ones that happen the vast majority of the time are a defender going in for a tackle and the offensive player naturally bracing down for a tackle. If there's any type of helmet to helmet contact there, or even just contact to the helmet, it's an automatic ejection. I think, like Hutch said, if you want to translate that over to basketball, that'd be kind of a flagrant system. But other sports seem to have it figured out. So there's no reason that the NCAA can't come in and put together something that works for these players to actually help prevent the penalties. Because right now we're seeing them way too much.
All right, coming up next, we're going to talk the Rice game. We're going to give our thoughts, our opinions, what we saw out there. And then up later on, we're going to get to Texas. I know that's what everybody wants to hear, but we got to get through Rice first. So just bear with us. Back here on the HawgBeat Hour, talking Rice this time. I'm your host, Mason Choate. We got Andrew Hutchinson, managing editor from HawgBeat.com, and then Alex Trader, the man, the myth, the legend, covering recruiting, covering Arkansas football. He's doing a great job as well. So, guys, we got to talk about this Rice game. Everybody knows how the first half went. It was not good. You thought it was another North Texas, Western Kentucky situation, which I'm going to be for real. I thought it was going to happen again, and I was really disappointed. But what they ended up doing was winning the game they were supposed to win. And you hear Sam Pittman say after the game, he's not going to apologize for the way they won. So that's awesome. That's awesome. You didn't just hear, I'm disappointed. We'll get back in there on Monday and we'll figure it out. If you guys can just figure out who I'm impersonating there. So rough first half. Hutch, what were you thinking there in the first half, and where do you think things really fell apart for Arkansas?
Well, I mean, in the first half, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, everyone was thinking about the previous times Arkansas played a Conference USA team, and didn't go well with Chad Morris at the helm. I've told people this. I fully believe Arkansas would have lost this game by 28 points at least. I mean, we saw what happened. I mean, they didn't just lose to North Texas and to Western Kentucky. They got blown out, and that was trending that way. You know, Arkansas falls down 17-7. And you're thinking, oh my goodness. But I mean, the offense couldn't get it done. I mean, they couldn't move the ball. I mean, 3 and out on 5 of their first 7 possessions. And, included in that's a block punt, some other special teams mistakes. You're just thinking, holy cow, here we go again. But, the defense, credit to defense for keeping them in there. I mean, they were given short field after short field and just continually limited them. I think the average starting field position for Rice in the first half was the 50-yard line. And that's unacceptable. That's just terrible. And that's because of the offense, their struggles, the special team struggles. But the defense really, really hung in there. And, KJ Jefferson, everyone criticized him. I mean, he's 4 of 11 in the first half, but there were 3 drop passes at least, maybe a 4th, depending on who you ask. So, if they caught passes better, if they just were able to put some drives together, it would have been a whole lot different first half, and you would have seen more than just the 7 points that they managed there. And I think it was the first quarter whenever they scored on KJ's kind of scramble run for 34 yards. But yeah, it was a rough first half. It was not looking good.
I'm glad you gave your perspective on the receivers drop passes, Hutch, because we know that you're a veteran wide receiver. You played a ton of wide receiver in high school, so yeah, I mean, you're our wide receiver expert, man, and we're very happy to have you along there to give your opinion on wide receivers.
Well, I don't know if played a lot. I mean, I practiced and I watched a lot of football in high school from the sideline. My career stats are, 1 reception for 7 yards. So not exactly, Treylon Burks over here, but I do know a drop pass when I see him. And there were multiple just passes that hit him, especially and Treylon Burks. I mean, you never see that guy drop passes. I mean, he's got those massive hands with 5XL gloves. and he dropped 2 of them, and it just you don't expect to see that. So I don't expect that to happen moving forward.
So I think that a little bit of that goes into us assessing KJ Jefferson's performance because I heard I don't remember where I heard it, but people were saying that KJ was throwing the ball so hard that the receivers just couldn't catch it. I don't know if you guys saw that. Alex, what did you think of the way KJ Jefferson was throwing the ball and just his overall performance in the game?
I thought some of the ones that got dropped were catchable. Those back-to-back slants in the end zone where it looked like he was throwing it to Connor Vanover for the touchdown there. I mean, those are the type of passes that I think a lot of people are keying in on. It's part of the problem with being a quarterback, honestly, is you're going to get all the praise if you go out there and you have a great game, but you're certainly getting all the blame as well if you go out there and the offense doesn't look perfect. And it's week 1. You struggled in the first half. The second half was not bad for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And you got to remember, anyone who isn't a junior or a redshirt sophomore or older hasn't played in front of a full stadium in their college career. It just hasn't happened. There hasn't been that opportunity. So you're going to have those jitters. It appears as though they got him out in that second half. You'll clearly have to see that going into the Texas game. That's a whole different breed. But I think, KJ, it's his first true start, or it's his first time as that true starting guy. So I think you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, the performance one way or another.
Yeah, so you kind of hit on that second half performance, and unless you're a sports gambler, that 31-0 run was like just really quiet. It didn't really feel like they were on a 31-0 run. But for some people, that Dominique Johnson touchdown was a lifesaver. But Hutch, in the second half, the defense really keyed in and delivered when they had to. And then, as Alex just mentioned, the offense started to do what they were supposed to do. So I asked you earlier where you saw it fall apart in the first half, but where did you start to see it click in the second half?
Yeah, I think they really found out what worked for them on offense. I mean, they started really pounding the rock between the tackles. We saw a little bit of Rocket Sanders, the true freshman, had a really nice drive where he accounted for like half the yards on the game-tying field goal drive. We saw KJ Jefferson connecting on his passes. We saw KJ Jefferson really getting involved in the run game, some RPOs, and the offense looked smoother. And I mean, that's what it has to. If you're going to score 31 points and a half, that's the most points they've scored in the second half of a game since 2003. So it's been a long time since we've seen a second half performance like that. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that every half of football. I mean, they're not going to go out there and average 62 points, but they're going to do better than that 7 points they managed in the first half. I feel like it's going to be somewhere there in the middle. The good thing though is you got the defense where they were good in the first half. They were good in the second half. I don't know if they're going to be that great and be able to stop all these better teams on the short fields like they did, but they showed me enough that, hey, this is going to be a salty defense. Maybe the offense doesn't have to do too terribly much for Arkansas to win ball games this year.
All right, guys, I think that's enough for Rice because we got to have plenty of time to talk this Texas matchup. Up next, Hutch is going to talk to Jason Sukamel from OrangeBloods.com. That's the rival site for Texas. It's a great interview. You get a lot of insight on what players are the best players for Texas, what Texas thinks about the rivalry, what Texas fans are saying, because realistically, they're just as excited as the Arkansas fans. It's as crazy as it seems. So it's a great interview, and that's coming up next. And then after that, we're going to talk about Texas ourselves here on the HawgBeat Hour.
Hey everybody, this is Andrew Hutchinson. I'm the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, the Arkansas site in the Rivals Network, and it is once again time for a Know the Foe Zoom chat. This week, the Razorbacks welcome old Southwest Conference foe Texas to Fayetteville for the first time since 2004. Jason Sukamel, a writer for OrangeBloods.com, our sister site that covers Texas in the Rivals Network. He was kind enough to join me to give us kind of an insider's perspective on the Longhorns. Appreciate you doing this, Jason. How are you?
I'm good, Andrew. My pleasure, man. the good news is we may be doing this annually, I guess, moving forward, right? With Texas moving to the SEC, so we won't be strangers for too long, man. So.
Exactly. Looking forward to it, of course. But before then, we got some football to play. Yeah, I was wanting to kind of start off kind of more broad and get your general thoughts on kind of how the fan base down in Austin is feeling about Steve Sarkisian and getting his first season underway.
Feeling pretty good after game one. I mean, Texas fans can be finicky, so let's see what happens after game two. But they played pretty well. Texas did in their opener against a pretty good Louisiana team that was ranked coming into that game. I think what Texas fans really appreciated about that game, it was just a pretty clean game. We've seen games under Tom Herman, certainly under Charlie Strong, where there was a lack of organization. It's kind of a running joke down here. Charlie Strong one time somehow elected to kick off on both halves, so Sark seemed to have things, especially for game one, seemed to have, there were obviously a couple penalties and things that they weren't too happy about, but all in all, I think people thought it was a really clean game. Texas played well. There were a couple of moments, and this is something Texas fans really wanted to see from Sark. There were a couple of moments where they actually audibled at the line of scrimmage. Hudson Card, the quarterback, kind of checked with Sark. They saw something, they changed the play up just based on something they had seen, like literally the play before, and it worked wonderfully. It went for a touchdown. So Texas fans are like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen that, and it's been a decade probably. As good as Tom Herman was regarded as an offensive coordinator, it never clicked in Austin in terms of adjustments and things like that. So all in all, again, it's 1 week, but yeah, Texas fans feel pretty good. I think Sark is really well liked. I say that a little bit tongue in cheek. Even before last week, the Texas fans really kind of found themselves, I think, relating to Sark. He's kind of different than Tom Herman, a little bit more laid back and I don't want to say more personable, but I don't know, just kind of easier to relate to. I think fans like watching him in the press conferences maybe a little bit more than they did Tom Herman. Yeah, but all in all, off to a good start. But again, hey, I say let's see what the vibe is after game two up in Arkansas. It may be after the first quarter. If Texas is down 10-0 after the first quarter, it'll be fire Steve Sarkisian on our message board. So, we'll see. But so far, things are pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you kind of touched on some of the main takeaways from that first game. It was a 38-18 win over, as you said, a really good Louisiana team. Was there anything in that game that maybe surprised you on either side of the ball or even on special teams, anything that you weren't expecting going in that you saw happen?
If I'm being honest, Andrew, it kind of went about as I expected. I think Texas played better than I expected. I expected it to be a lower scoring game in a closer game. I did not pick Texas to win by 20. I think I had Texas winning the game 27-20. So I had a pretty low scoring, close victory. So all in all, I would go back to what I said in my first answer, just the fact that it was a clean game from top to bottom on both sides of the ball. And the other thing that I would guess was a little surprising to me was the play of Hudson Card, the freshman quarterback in his first start. I thought Hudson Card thought he'd do well. I thought he'd have his moments, but I thought there might be stints, maybe a full quarter where he really struggled and the offense was sluggish, but he came out, they went 3-and-out in their first series. And of course, right after everybody's like, oh my gosh, is it time to replace Hudson Card? But after that, he played really well. If I look at the stats, he threw for, it was 224, but it's pretty efficient 224 on 14 completions. QBR was like 160 something, I believe, or 180 something, I believe. I don't have that in front of me, but so all in all, it was a very efficient performance for Hudson Card in his first start. I thought he actually played better than I expected him to.
Yeah, that was going to leads right into my next question. I know there was a quarterback battle down there. Personally, I saw Casey Thompson in the bowl game, and I was thinking, oh wow, that guy's pretty good. They're going to have a guy, and lo and behold, Hudson Card beats him out. How did that battle unfold during camp, and how do you envision Texas using Thompson, moving forward? I know he played some in the Louisiana game as well. Is he just a mop-up guy at this point?
Well, to answer the second part first, no, they don't consider him a mop-up guy. He came in probably midway through the third quarter of this last game. I'd say the game was pretty much in hand, but it wasn't over by any means. Louisiana was still in that game, and Casey Thompson comes in and leads them right down for a touchdown in his drive. And then after that, it was more just handing the ball off after that. So I think ultimately, Sark says, hey, we're going to need both quarterbacks. We're going to have to play both quarterbacks at some point this year, be it Hudson Card getting injury or, with COVID, you never know what might happen. So they are planning to prepare both guys to be potential starters. Hudson Card is on top of the depth chart. He'll be the guy that takes the first series Saturday night against Arkansas. But they want to get Casey Thompson in the game in meaningful situations. They don't want it to be just kind of your tried and true mop-up duty, what you're used to seeing. So, but it was a really good battle all camp. Casey, like you said, he played in the bowl game. He came in, replaced Sam Ellinger in the second half against Colorado, and he's throwing it all over the field and marches Texas up and down the field. Was really, really good. But we had heard even before that, hey, Hudson Card, this kid is the real deal behind the scenes. They just didn't want to play him in that bowl game, being a true freshman, so on and so forth. So it was a close battle all fall camp. Sarkisian said, hey, man, this may be the toughest quarterback decision he's ever had to make at any of his coaching stops. Okay, so it was that close. Ultimately, they went with Hudson Card. It worked out well for him in game one, but who's to say? I mean, Casey Thompson looked really good in game one, too. So it's nice for Texas knowing they have two pretty good options. It's going to be interesting with Hudson. This will be his first true road start, first really hostile environment this weekend. So we'll see how he handles that. Might they go to Casey Thompson a little earlier than they did last week? It's possible. I think how the game unfolds, obviously will play a big part in that. But behind the scenes, if you ask people inside the Texas program, they like what they have in Casey Thompson. They think Hudson Card, as he gains more experience, has true, say, superstar potential. They think he really is that kind of player. I mean, a high NFL draft pick if he continues to develop. He's still a freshman, so a lot of development there. But both those guys will play. They're high on both those players at the quarterback position.
That makes sense. And of course, I've got to ask you about Bijan Robinson. I mean, what does he bring to the table, and what makes him so good for Texas?
What he brings to the table, Andrew, pretty much everything. He does everything pretty well. I mean, there's really not a weakness. This is a guy, and I'll start with off the field. He is as high of a character person as you're ever going to meet for a young man his age. And I was fortunate enough to cover him as a recruit, and same thing even when he was a recruit. I mean, just an incredible person off the field, great representative for the university off the field, but on the field, good vision. He's fast. I think he's probably one of the better receiving backs I've ever covered. I've been doing this 20 years in terms of covering high school prospects. He may be one of the best receiving running backs I've ever seen. He's that good of a receiver. He runs with power. You'll see it when you look at him. His legs are like tree trunks, but people kind of thought of him more of as a finesse back coming out of high school, a guy who can work in space, a guy who's going to be involved in the passing game, but he can do that for you, but he can also run through tackles. I mean, if you try to ankle tackle or leg tackle Bijan, he's not going to go down, man. He's going to run through tackles. So he does a little bit of everything for them. He's the guy that's going to make this offense go. I mean, the quarterbacks I mentioned played well, but it all starts with Bijan Robinson, their running back, and Roschon Johnson is their backup running back. He's pretty good as well. So, everybody looks at Sark as being a kind of, a guy that's going to go up tempo and throw it all over the field, but it does start with that running back position, that ground game, in Bijan Robinson leading the way. He was the National Player of the Week by one, I forget which publication it was, named him the National Player of the Week after last week's performance. And it was funny, I came out of that game last week and I wrote this in my post-game thing. I said, Bijan was really good. He had 103 yards rushing in a touchdown. He had 73 yards receiving in a touchdown. You're almost, talking 180 yards total offense and 2 touchdowns. And I was like, kind of felt like a pretty mediocre performance, honestly. I think he's got better days ahead of him because he didn't have the huge splash play that maybe that's what I was waiting to see a little bit more of. But yeah, Bijan's a tremendous player, legitimate All-American candidate. So that'll be obviously the focal point that the Arkansas defense will want to stop first.
And to maybe switch gears a little bit and look at the Texas defense, I know Sark and Texas, they pursued Barry Odom for a little bit this offseason before they landed Pete Kwiatkowski. I believe I got that right, from Washington. Yeah, what are the early reviews of the Longhorns on that side of the ball?
Pretty good. They looked pretty good last week. Louisiana was able to move the ball late. I don't know that Louisiana was the best test. We'll see what they're made of this week against Arkansas. But Louisiana and Arkansas are pretty similar. They both had mobile quarterbacks, and Texas showed that they could scheme pretty well against the mobile quarterbacks. But playing in the Big 12 can kind of be a defensive coordinator's worst nightmares at times. So we'll see how this unfolds long term. But I think so far people are pretty happy just on what we've kind of heard through scrimmage reports, what they saw in week one. Kwiatkowski's a guy that he'll change things up on the fly. He'll blitz from a lot of different angles. He'll do some exotic stuff. He'll do different formations against different personnel groups or different offensive schemes. So you never know really from week to week. Are they going to run a base 3-4? Are they going to be out of a nickel? Are they going to have, who the heck knows, 2 defensive linemen and just fly around with a bunch of DBs depending on who they're playing? So he'll change things up quite a bit. There's some pretty good depth along the defensive line, excuse me. A linebacker, I would say I'd call it top heavy. DeMarvion Overshawn's really good. Luke Brockermeyer is a former walk-on who's starting for Texas at the linebacker position. And then their secondary played pretty well in that season opener. They're pretty set on the outside at cornerbacks, got a couple young parts at safety. But all in all, I think it's a defense with some talent. And people are pretty happy with what they saw from Coach Kwiatkowski's defense in week one. But again, tougher tests lie ahead. We'll see how that goes moving forward.
And you kind of touched on a couple of the guys there, but who is the one guy maybe on that side of the ball on defense that really makes that unit go? I mean, is there a guy that Texas just, you can't afford to lose him to a targeting penalty or something like that because he brings so much to the defense?
Yeah, it would probably be DeMarvion Overshawn, their linebacker. He's a converted safety, came in as a underclassman All-American safety that they've kind of spun down. They did that last year under the previous staff, and now he's a full-time linebacker. But he's a guy that just flies to the football, really athletic, obviously being a former safety, very physical. Sometimes those converted DBs aren't as physical at the point of attack, but he is. He holds up pretty well against the run. They've got a really good defensive line in front of him. What we saw last week was that defensive line took on blockers, freed up the linebackers to make plays. Okay. So it wasn't, as I'm watching it, I'm kind of thinking, hey, this defensive line needs to be a little more active. You're not seeing pressures in the backfield or sacks from that defensive line. Then I look up and I'm like, man, Overshawn and Brockermeyer, the 2 linebackers, actually had, I think it was almost 50% of the team's tackles. I remember in the first half, I was like, wow, they've got literally almost half of the team's tackles. So Overshawn is kind of the straw that stirs the drink, if you will. That's the guy they'll probably build around. But there is talent. A guy like Keandre Coburn on the defensive line is talented. Tavondre Sweat. They've got talent at the cornerbacks position. But if I'm picking one, it'd probably be DeMarvion Overshawn. He's the guy you're probably going to see if there's some postseason award nominations. He's probably the name you're going to see in those types of award situations.
Yeah, and another thing I was going to get your thoughts on. I mean, to be quite honest, I was born after Arkansas left the Southwest Conference. I've been educated on the rivalry. Sam Pittman said this week that he's educating the players on the Arkansas-Texas rivalry. What's kind of the feeling down there? I mean, both among the fans and inside the football facility about this game. I mean, are people excited about this matchup?
Oh yeah. Listen, everybody was excited for game one because it's game one. We're coming out of COVID, of course, but people are going to be able to go to the stands. And as soon as that Louisiana game ended, it was on our Orange Bloods message board, a F Arkansas. So, I mean, we've got some people that still hold a grudge. And I think they've had this game circled on their calendars for a while, Arkansas and Oklahoma. So, it's an old rivalry, as you know, with historical ties. So I would say inside the program, there's a healthy respect. Sark, it really didn't come up much in his press conference on Monday. He said, hey, it's a rivalry, obviously, he's familiar with, and the pageantry and history of college football. I'm sure it will be discussed. They know noise is going to be a factor. They know it's going to be a hostile environment. So that's something they're going to prepare for this week. But yeah, it is a game that the fans are extremely excited for. And Texas fans have a chip on their shoulder. I mean, that's not new. They do it pretty much every year. But this is a game they really want Texas to go up there and get the W, especially on Arkansas's home field. They would love nothing more to come out of that one with the victory. So should be a fun game, should be an exciting game. Like I said, first road test for Hudson Card. We'll see how he responds. You have to know Arkansas is going to be fired up, prepared to play well, have a lot of emotion. So I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and the last thing I got for you is I mean, you don't necessarily have to give a score prediction here, but I was wondering how you kind of see this weekend's game going. I think the spread opened around 3.5, and now it's climbed to 6.5 in favor of the Horns. What do you see happening this weekend?
Well, I didn't even know the spread, so that's news to me. But I would probably pick it about what the spread is. I think, when I watched some of the Arkansas game last week on television, of course, before the Texas game, and when I was watching the first half, I'm like, whoa, Rice is giving them everything they want. And then I wasn't able to watch the end of it. I saw it looks like they started to exert their will late and kind of ran away with it. Texas can throw a lot of depth at you defensively. I don't think Texas will wear down the way it looked like Rice probably did. So Arkansas, I think, is going to have to play better offensively. I think Texas will do a good job of scheming to take away the Arkansas running game, including from the quarterback. They're going to probably make him beat them with their arm. I think it's going to be a close game. I haven't truly broken down the matchups. That'll be something I do starting tonight and tomorrow. But based on what I saw from Arkansas, what I saw from Texas, of course, on Saturday, I do think Texas is probably the better team on paper. You go to these rivalry games, hey, man, throw paper out the window. Some of that stuff never matters in rivalry games. But if I'm picking it right now based on what I saw last week, I don't really have a score prediction, but I think Texas probably wins it. I would have said probably 4 to 6 points. I think it'll be a close game, maybe a big play here or there, make a difference in the fourth quarter, or a special teams play. But I probably will pick Texas unless I start uncovering the matchups. Like, whoa, Arkansas can really exploit this, or something comes up differently. Texas does have a couple injury notes that are a bit concerning if you're a Longhorn fan. One of their more veteran offensive linemen, Junior Angelau, they haven't ruled him out, but he went down last week with a knee injury. He's kind of day to day. They had one of their better receivers had to sit out last week. He's not on the depth chart, so I don't think he'll be back. Troy O'Mary, not sure on that. And then Jared Wiley is one of their, I'd call him a co-starter at tight end. He's day to day. I don't think you'll see him this week. He's day to day as well, though. So a couple of little things there on injuries that maybe have you concerned from a Texas perspective. But ultimately, I think I'll probably wind up picking Texas in a fairly close game.
Well, I think that's all I got for you, Jason. Again, I really appreciate you coming on and give us some insight on what should be a really fun game and atmosphere inside Razorback Stadium. To everyone listening and watching, just a reminder, kickoff is at 6 o'clock Central. You can watch the game on ESPN. Until then, stay locked on HawgBeat for the latest news and updates on all things Arkansas.
All right, back on the HawgBeat Hour. Mason Choate, Andrew Hutchinson, and Alex Trader along with you. This is the big one, guys. The big segment. We got to talk Texas. Probably the biggest preview segment of the entire season, unless Arkansas is like undefeated going into A&M or Alabama or something like that. This is a big game. None of us really know the significance of the rivalry like some people do, because we're not old enough to know it. Even Hutch, and he's like 40 years old. So it's a significant rivalry. I mean, you can see it's Texas Hate Week. It's a big deal, and it's a sellout crowd. We talked about it earlier. Standing room only, probably going to be 80,000 plus. You have to think maybe. Hutch, how big of a deal is it? And I mean, you talked to Jason Sukamel. It's a big deal to Texas as well. Like these Texas fans are not like Steve Sarkisian said. They're just going to overlook it. We're a team with no face. Texas fans hate Arkansas just as much as Arkansas hate Texas, is what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a big rivalry. I mean, I was born a couple of years after Arkansas joined the SEC, so I didn't experience it firsthand. However, I have parents, I have grandparents who that's what they know. And they taught it to me early on in life that, Arkansas fans hate Texas. That's just how it is. And so it's always been a great series. I mean, Texas has dominated it just through the years as far as, I think they lead the series. I don't know what it is, but it's a pretty hefty lead. But Arkansas has had some really good moments. I mean, the 64 season when Arkansas beat them, really kind of keyed the national championship run. I think they beat them 3 years in a row during the 60s when Frank Broyles really had things rolling. Everyone remembers I believe it was a 1981 game where Arkansas knocked off number one Texas. It was like 42-11 or something like that. Just absolutely boat raced them. And there have been some other, really good moments in more recent years, games that I remember. I mean, the 2014 Texas Bowl where they just dominated Texas. The 2003 game down in Austin, Matt Jones ran all over them. Then the following year, they come up to Fayetteville, and the late fumble by Matt Jones, broke my 10-year-old heart. And it was just, there's been some great games, and I'm really looking forward to this one to kind of renew the rivalry and get to experience it, as an adult. in Fayetteville with a great environment. I was at the Texas Bowl as a member of the media, but that's a bowl game. And even though Sam Pittman said that it was an incredible electric atmosphere, it's going to be nothing compared to what we're going to see this Saturday. It's going to be incredible. As you mentioned, sellout, standing room only crowd. I'm just so excited. This is what college football is all about, and I'm pumped. I'm ready for Saturday to get here.
As we all are, but we got to talk about Texas first. Week 1 against Louisiana, a ranked Louisiana team. Texas took care of business. It was a very smooth game for the most part for the Longhorns. They did what they were supposed to do. Defense, not dominant, but that offense is good, man. We know of Bijan Robinson. We could probably not even talk about him in this segment because everybody's heard about him all week, but we're going to anyways. It was the first game with Steve Sarkisian as their head coach, so they took care of business. I wouldn't say Texas is back because they're ranked number 15 or whatever, but this is a good Texas team. They got talent up and down the roster. And let's just start with that offense with Hudson Card. It's going to be his first real road test as a starting quarterback for Texas. And it's going to be a big test, and not just for Hudson Card, but for KJ Jefferson too. This is going to be the biggest crowd that either one of these quarterbacks has played in front of. Hutch, how do you see that going? And as far as the Texas offense, let us know what you think, man.
Yeah, Hudson Card, it's all, I've seen a lot of Texas fans. I've been reading what they're saying, and they all kind of believe, it's going to come down to how Hudson Card does. How can he handle the pressure of a rowdy environment? And it's going to be intense. It's not something that is going to be easy for him. It's not like he's getting to make his road debut at Kansas or something. This is going to be a wild environment, and I'm anxious to see how he does. KJ at least has the advantage. He's got a home start under his belt now. You got those nerves out. He actually talked about that after the Rice game, that he was a little bit nervous, that first half, and then he kind of settled in the second half. So you think, okay, he's got that out of the way. He'll be able to handle that. He started on the road a couple of times, and he started at Missouri last year, played really well. And the year before that, as a true freshman, he started at number 1 LSU. Did not go particularly well for him or the Razorbacks, but he kind of has that experience. So it's not going to be new to him. You can't say the same thing about Hudson Card. I think that's going to be a factor. How big of a factor, I'm not 100% sure. We don't know what Hudson Card's mental makeup is. Is he going to be a guy that can be, a Colt McCoy, Vince Young type guy for Texas? Or is he going to be a guy that, maybe kind of struggles when the lights are the brightest? So I'm really anxious to see how both of the quarterbacks play, because I think they're both really talented. Both of them were 4-star recruits coming out of high school, and they have a lot of potential. So I'm really excited to see how both of those guys perform.
Yeah, so Card is, according to the Texas people, Card is the next big thing. They think that he can be that Colt McCoy, Vince Young type guy. And he's really young and really talented. So you're right. This is going to be the first true test to see if he will be that way. So, but we got to talk about Bijan Robinson. Alex, I'll bring you in on this. I think you told me that he was almost going to go to Ohio State at one point, and you're a huge Ohio State guy. So what do you know about Bijan Robinson? And he's a legit Heisman contender, right?
I believe so. I think coming out of high school, just watching the couple clips I would see on Twitter, this kid's legit, and you could see it as early as then. Last year, Tom Herman got fired, and he got fired for a reason. He used Bijan Robinson as kind of a committee back and had him as the third guy in that committee. But whenever he touched the ball, you were at risk of giving up a touchdown. With Mo Ibrahim's unfortunate injury last Thursday, Robinson's for my money, he's the best running back in the country right now. And, it's tough for a running back to win Heisman, but last year we saw Devontae Smith. He kind of broke that glass ceiling, and now it's kind of chaos in that Heisman race for college football. Putting him back in that backfield as the number 1 guy is going to make such a difference, because with more touches, you have more chances to break one loose. They will motion him out into the field and have him utilized as kind of a receiver. You saw a easy touchdown on a screen pass last week. It's going to be a key focus for Sam Pittman and Barry Odom, and I'm sure that they know this. I'm sure that they know they have to key in on him. But like Hutch said, if you make Hudson Card beat you, he's either going to beat you or he's not. I don't think you can let Bijan Robinson beat you and walk away feeling confident in your game plan.
Yeah, so we know that Sam Pittman knows of Bijan Robinson. We do also know that at one point in time, Sam Pittman didn't know if Bijan Robinson was the guy returning kicks or not. So hopefully he knows who's returning kicks now. But let's talk about that Texas defense. It's a very veteran defense. They've got, I don't know, it's like 32 combined starts among their top two corners. The safeties are really good. One of them is Brendan Schooler, a guy who was a wide receiver for 4 years at Oregon, was wide receiver at Texas last year. And then the defensive line, I mean, they've got some big, like semi-truck sized dudes on the defensive line. So, Hutch, what do you think of that Texas defense? And then I didn't even mention the linebackers, but I mean, I guess the linebackers are where the Texas fans are most confident in.
Yeah, I think they really like their linebackers. I think that DeMarvion Overshone is kind of the heart and soul of that defense. He's the guy that we heard Jason from Orange Bloods tell us earlier in the show that he's the guy. If he goes down, they probably feel the least good about. Just like if Jalen Catalon goes down for Arkansas, you're thinking, oh crap, here we go. Same thing with Grant Morgan, really, and that's their guy. And you mentioned the secondary. The secondary is very veteran. A lot of seniors. I mean, BJ Foster, I believe is his name, is a former 5-star guy, really good player. A lot of snaps under these guys' belts. So it's going to be a challenge. They're not going to be they're not going to be fazed by facing a guy like KJ Jefferson. They're going to be able to play well, and KJ is going to have to be sharp, because if he makes a mistake, they're probably going to make him pay. But I think the strength of that defense is probably their linebackers. I mean, they've got Luke Brockermeyer. He's a former walk-on who's now starting at middle linebacker, if that sounds familiar. It's kind of like their version of Grant Morgan. He's a son of a legendary Texas player. His two brothers were like highly touted recruits. I think they ended up going to Alabama. It's kind of weird, but he went to Texas, walked on, and not only earned a scholarship, but here he is starting as a middle linebacker for the Longhorns. So pretty cool story there. But yeah, they've got a lot of talent on that defense. I mean, they got talent everywhere, to be honest, and there's a reason for that. I mean, they've been ranked in the top 10 recruiting rankings for however, who knows how long. That's another reason, as Alex said earlier, that Tom Herman got fired. He got fired for a reason. He's got enough talent to be better than what they were.
Now, I want to give a quick preview of my matchup of the week that'll be out on HawgBeat.com on Friday. I'm keying in on the Arkansas receivers versus this veteran Texas secondary. It's not a secondary that you look at them and you're like, man, they've got some crazy good playmakers. What they have is guys who are consistent and guys who are going to beat you up. Like, they have physical guys. Josh Thompson has been described as just a physical guy. And I think that if Treylon Burks starts, exploiting the defense, they're just going to throw Thompson on him, and we'll see how that goes. But I want to ask you guys, what do you think of the matchup? Because we know Treylon Burks is going to get his, but is there a specific Arkansas receiver, maybe a Davion Warren, maybe a Tyson Morris, maybe a Keyshawn Jackson even, that you can see really helping KJ Jefferson out against that elite, maybe not elite, but experienced Texas secondary?
Yeah, I mean, the first guy that comes to mind is just Tyson Morris. I mean, I was really high on him going into the Rice game, and I thought he was going to have a big game, and he kind of did. A big game, comparatively speaking, to everyone else. 42 yards, just like Treylon Burks, and had the really big, nice one-handed catch with a guy draped all over him, and had a touchdown. So I like him, but you mentioned just the physicality of that defense. It makes me wonder if this could be a coming out party for Keyshawn Jackson. I mean, he's a big guy, 4-star recruit, true freshman, but we saw his physicality against Rice. It led to a questionable, we'll call it, a holding penalty that wiped out KJ Jefferson's long touchdown run. I mean, he was 30 yards down the field blocking a receiver or blocking a defensive back. So he's got the physicality, he's got the size. Maybe this is a coming out party for Keytron Jackson.
Yeah, and I like Keytron a lot, just from what I've seen from him in practice and what I've heard about him. He seems to be that next guy after Treylon Burks to come in and be a true star. I think with the physicality, you might try to throw in some quick crossing routes with the quicker guys like Davion Warren. But I really think there's an opportunity here to get the tight ends involved and kind of spread out that ball to 4 or 5 different guys and make Texas think about what they're doing and not let them just double up on Treylon Burks all day. You kind of have to open him up and give him a chance to it, kind of like the play action pass. You don't want to sit there and pass. You want to have a couple runs to set up something that they're not expecting. And I think that's really what it's going to come down to, is find someone who can throw them off the scent of Treylon Burks.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up with our score predictions. To be honest with you, I haven't even thought of mine yet because I've been on the line all week long of who I think is going to win. So we'll go with the MVP dad first. Andrew Hutchinson, what is your score prediction?
Yeah, before the season, this is a game I picked Arkansas to lose. I think I had it 24-21 Texas. I still think it's probably going to be a game Texas wins. I just don't think Arkansas quite has the talent and the depth that Texas does. And I think Bijan Robinson is a difference maker. I think he's going to be the guy that really helps Texas win this game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a heartbreaking finish. I mean, that 2004 game keeps coming to mind. I feel like something along those lines is going to happen, and we're going to see Texas pull away. I don't know if 24-21, maybe it's going to be a 27-24, something like that. I just feel like it's going to end in heartbreaking fashion for Arkansas, unfortunately, because I know it's a game everyone's really hoping Arkansas finds a way to pull out.
Mr. Recruiting expert, Alex Trader, what is your prediction?
I've been thinking about this moment all week, trying to figure out what I wanted to say here. Coming into this through the entire offseason, I thought that this was a game Arkansas was going to come in and kind of stun the world. Last week has me a little bit uneasy about that. I'm going to be honest. I think the defense is good enough to where Texas is not going to get their 38 points. And I think the offense has enough in it to score at a quicker clip than what they did last week. I'm not saying they're going to get 38 against Texas, but I think they'll probably go over the 18 that Louisiana had. I'm kind of set in on Texas at 23. Now, Arkansas, I don't know if I want to go 20. I don't know if I want to go 24, 17. I think they will have the ball with a chance to make something incredible happen at home at the end of this game. I'll say Arkansas 21-23. I'll say Texas 21-23. But I would not be surprised if Arkansas was able to pull this one out in a close game.
Alex, I thought you were going to pick Arkansas, and I wasn't going to be able to be the one that's different and picks Arkansas. But that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be the guy that's different and picks Arkansas. I'm going to take the Hogs 20-17. I think Texas misses a field goal as time expires to tie it up and send it to overtime. So that's my prediction. I'm going to take the Hogs just to be different. If one of y'all picked Arkansas, I probably would have taken Texas. But that's going to do it for us on the HawgBeat Hour. I've been Mason Choate. He's been Andrew Hutchinson, and he's been Alex Trader. Thank you guys for listening to the HawgBeat Hour.